Hello and welcome to this video on Bikini Atoll, a notorious American nuclear weapons test site. If you have seen any of the older Godzilla movies, where there is footage of atomic weapons exploding at a beach or near an ocean, this was most likely the place being featured. It is also the source of the world's first nuclear disaster. In order to match Russia and other countries' efforts at developing atomic weapons, bigger and better devices were needed. America needed a site to test these new weapons, and Bikini Atoll was chosen. This was not a barren island, but a location with a large community who were promised that after testing was completed, they could return home. This was agreed to on the premise that they would be relocated by America. The only problem with this agreement was that fallout lingers for a long time due to its half-life, and Bikini Atoll was a test site for at least 23 nuclear weapon explosions. This meant 42.2 megatons of nuclear explosive power was deployed on a site that the local residents were meant to return to within a relatively short period of time. The United States later paid out for the islanders and their descendants. They received more than $125 million in compensation for not only the damage by the nuclear testing, but also from being displaced from their original home island. They were later moved to smaller and less capable islands that could less effectively support their population. Even in as late as 1997, 40 years after the last atomic bombs were dropped, the background amount of radiation on the island was equal to 2.4 millisieverts a year. That's the same as normal background radiation, but if you were also drinking water but eating food sourced from outside the island, you would have nearly twice that at 4.5 millisieverts a year. If you were forced to eat food grown on the island itself, your radiation dose would increase drastically. In fact, the local food supply is still irradiated, and there is recommendation not to resettle the islands. In 1998, the International Atomic Energy Association found that Bikini Atoll is still not safe for habitation because of those levels of radiation. The USA was able to do this for one reason, and it is the only time this reason has ever been used. After World War II, in 1947 the US was able to petition the United States to designate it the United Nations Strategic Trust Territory. This covered an area known as Micronesia, and it has only ever been granted by the UN to the US in this particular case. The United States Navy was able to take control of the islands in that area from Guam until 1951. Then, after this, the Department of the Interior took over, and they began administering it from Saipan. This particular change in law and movement by the UN allowed the US to do what should have been called promotion of economic advancement and self-sufficiency. What wound up happening instead was that the inhabitants were booted from their island, lost just about all their possessions, land, history and culture, and resources, and then the government attempted to pay them off. In order to run these tests, the United States had to assemble not only a massive fleet of 242 ships, which also had to have supply stations, land-based testing platforms, laboratories, testing equipment, measuring equipment, and 42,000 personnel to run it all. This meant Bikini Atoll became the world's largest ship graveyard, and it would have been equal to the world's 6th largest navy if it were taken by itself. Bikini Atoll has become the nuclear disaster it is because over the years that it was being used for its purposes, multiple tests were run. Some of these operations were known as Operation Crossroads. This had 2 detonations. Each had 23 kiloton equivalent bombs dropped on it. Castle Bravo, with 15 megaton explosions that exceeded the expected yield by 2-fold. The Red Wing series, which occurred in 1954, 56, and 58. They dropped 21 explosions during this time, and the 21 explosions had a total yield of 75 megatons. Then the Hardtack Tests in 1958. This wasn't a limited test. They were trying air bursts, ground bursts, underwater bursts, anything they could think of to make their bombs more effective. The effect of these tests was not just limited to the forced relocation and almost permanent exile of the local peoples of Bikini Atoll. Unlike the doomsday towns of regular weapons testing, which were filled with mannequins, it is the large number of crew, scientists, and other personnel from the USA who were impacted by the testing. They were in a position and affected, like the people of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, due to the fallout, flawed measuring, and poor safety measures. They were exposed to incredibly high doses of radiation in very short periods. Bikini Atoll is a relic of the past and a perfect example of playing with fire at many different levels, and sadly, many people were burnt in the process. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions you might have below.